As you heard last week, 100% of our past presidents, these folks right here and about 10 others who couldn't be with us today, 100% of them proposed Ann Farrell for honorary membership in this club. That action had been unanimously approved by the classification committee and the board, and by your vote last week, 293 to 0. I counted it. According to Rotary International, an honorary membership is the highest distinction a club like ours can bestow and should be conferred only in exceptional cases. It should recognize an individual for unusual contributions to Rotary and/or the community in a manner consistent with Rotary values. Ann Farrell is such an individual, both for what she's done for Rotary and for this community. Ann was one of the first women to join our club in 1987. A mere 9 years later, in 1996, as you know, she became our first female president. There could not have been a better choice. When people ask her, Ann, aren't you the first? She would immediately interrupt and say, yes, proudly, I am the first Farrell as president of Seattle Rotary. Her only agenda was to advance the goals of our club and to be faithful to its legacy. If there were any good old boys still left who harbored any doubts about the wisdom of women in Rotary, Ann put that to rest for good. You heard last week that during the 19 years she headed the Seattle Foundation, the funds entrusted to them grew from 10 million to 300 million. 3,000%. That's good. Or is that 3 million? You're better at that than I am. She has made this community a better place by serving on, get this, 26 nonprofit boards. And get this, 13 of them as chairperson. Also on 6 corporate boards, 2 of them as chairperson. She is a role model for women and men. She is service above self personified. So I am proud to present her today as she takes her place among others with 2 Ellises, 2 Gateses, 2 Evans, as an honorary member of the Rotary Club of Seattle. Ladies and gentlemen, Ann Farrell.
Thank you all. Thank you very much. There's nothing like being introduced by Don Kraft. I mean, he is clearly Mr. Rotary in this town and an old friend of mine. So catching up with Don is a great pleasure. But as I look around this room and as I've been greeted by so many of you, I realize how many of my old friends are still Rotarians and still in this room. But taking it even further, I realize how many of you I don't know, and I look forward to having the opportunity to not only get to know the new members, new, but relatively new, but also to work with you. So I consider this a huge honor. Don really made that clear that anyone who accepts this honor does so humbly. It's a rare thing, and I'm a very appreciative person. And I do look forward to being back with you. It's great to see so many of you here today. And I would also say that those who are traveling, there were several people who sent me an email and gave me good wishes, so I feel very welcomed. And I thank the past presidents. I see all of you up here in front. It's a thrill for me. I appreciate it very much. And Don, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. These are on behalf of the Seattle Foundation and myself and Bill Sperling and Tony Mistress. Just thank you. Oh, I just wanted to say that we are, on behalf of the Seattle Foundation, current and former members of Rotary, we just wanted to present Ann with some flowers and thank her for the great legacy that she's left for the Seattle Foundation. So.
Thank you, Seattle Foundation.
While the panelists are making their way, I have to tell you one of the first experiences I had. I was actually in Brazil for the Rotary International Convention, and I got to witness the emails that went around when Ann Farrell was proposed as an honorary member, and it was the most impressive lineup of compliments that I have ever seen. And I think the email exchange happened within like an hour. I mean, we had all the past presidents chiming in, and I got to know Ann Farrell through their eyes. And Ann, we are so excited to have you back. So Mark Wright, please come to the stage. You're on.
We're doing a bit of a chair change because as a guy, I've never worn a dress, and this is probably going to be more comfortable. So while that's being done, I wanted to say I was telling my wife about today's program, and I said it's featuring the past presidents of our club, and she said, oh, is it kind of like Where Are They Now? And I was like, Bob Ladd, private detective in Bellevue now. And so anyway, I said, no, we're just looking at the legacy of leadership in our club, and it's going to be a great time. One thing I wanted to say before we get started, and let's bring the panel up right now, please, if you guys would come up and be seated. I wish Phil Smart were here. I mean, think about, he would be right there, and so in some ways I think he probably is here, but he definitely has left his mark on this club and on so many of you. So Ann, I wanted to say congratulations to you, a well-deserved honor for someone who has given so much to this city and to this club. So today's program is all about celebrating the leaders of the Downtown Seattle Rotary Club, past and present. And on the face of it, that might sound a little bit self-serving, but it's not, because today we're going to talk about lessons in leadership. We're going to talk about mistakes of the past and successes that have defined who we are as an organization. Today's program is called A Legacy of Leadership because for the past 106 years during lunch meetings like this, presidents of our club have built a legacy of leadership and of values that continues today. They serve for a year, and then they hand the torch to someone else, who hands it to another and to another. I hope you leave today's program inspired by our panel, which I'll introduce in just a minute. Each faced significant challenges during their presidencies. Each rose to the occasion, but they didn't do it alone. They had help, and a lot of that help came from the people at these two tables in the front here, a group I'm about to introduce. We're honored today to have 19 past presidents, if my math is correct, of Seattle number 4 in attendance. Let's give them a round of applause right now. Thank you for being here. So as I call your name, if you would please stand or simply wave if standing for a couple of minutes is uncomfortable, I get that. So please just wave or stand. Please, audience, hold your applause until the end, and we will recognize them at the end. So this is a list of the who's who. First, 1969, Bob Ladd. 1971, Joe James. 1973, Don Kraft. 1976, Jim G. McCurdy. 1986, John Durbin. John, you don't have to stand if you don't want to. 1994, Bruce Walker. 1996, Ann Farrell. 1998, Bill Weisfield. 2001, Dorothy Bullitt. 2002, Ralph Monroe. I miss you, man. You never know what's going to happen when Ralph's in the room. I love it. 2003, Todd Sommerfeld. 2008, Nancy Sclater. 2009, Tim Bendokas. 2010, Sten Chrissy. 2011, Jim W. McCurdy. 2012, Paul Ishii. 2013, Laura Rehrman. And 2014, Tom Betts. Let's give them a warm round of applause. Thank you so much for being here. Oh, wait, did I miss? How could I forget? I skipped Bill Center, 2006, and Skip Cotkins. Skip, I'm sorry. Oh, man, I'm so sorry. My eyesight is going bad. I think I'll put these on. Okay. I'm so sorry, you guys. So now I'd like to introduce the panel. You all know them. John Durbin served as our president from 1986 to 87. In that term, he oversaw the club's admission of the first female members. Ann Farrell, as you know, was among the first group of women to join Seattle Rotary in 1987, which was during John's term. She later became, as you heard, the first female president of our club in 1996. Nancy Sclater served as our club's centennial president in 2008 and 2009. So I wanted to thank the panel for being here. It's going to be a great conversation that we're going to have today. I love learning more about Rotarians because every time I just get to hear stories about you all, I'm impressed not only with your life experiences, but who you are as people. So I thought that we would start out getting to know a little bit more about you. Ann, why don't you tell us briefly about your career, and then what was your first introduction to Rotary?
Well, the career did not start in my 20s as it does today. I didn't go to work until I was nearly 40, and my girls were graduating from college and moving on in life. So I had the opportunity to be a stay-at-home mom, as we would call it today. But during that period of time, I also had the opportunity, the privilege really, of serving on a lot of nonprofit boards and doing volunteer work in this community. And that led me eventually to the Seattle Foundation, which was my career and was my passion for 20 years. So that was a nice introduction that Allison gave me, and I certainly appreciate the flowers. Thank you very much. So my career began in my midlife, and it has been my absolute passion ever since.
Nancy, you told me that your first introduction was when you were asked to speak to a Rotary Club.
That's correct. I was speaking to the Shoreline Club in Shoreline and received a phone call after speaking, and would I consider membership? And when I went to the next meeting, I realized that there weren't a lot of women in the room. It hadn't occurred to me before then. But I was a member of Shoreline Rotary, and then was one of the charter members of the Shoreline Breakfast Rotary. And then when my work took me downtown, I joined Seattle Rotary.
And tell me a little bit about your work history. This is like a job interview, isn't it?
It is, it is.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years,
And by the
Nancy?
way, I'm open to any other opportunities. I have spent my career working with nonprofit organizations in board governance and fundraising.
So it was fun talking with you, John, on the telephone. I learned a lot about your past, and your connection to Rotary goes way back.
Right. I guess I should cross my legs.
Yeah, we all got it.
I grew up in Rushville, Indiana, town of 7,000 people. Closer? Okay, a town of 7,000 people. My mother and dad.
Let me just check this. Is it on? No, it got turned off. You were clutching it so tightly you turned it off. There we go.
So I grew up in Rushville, Indiana. My parents had a small hotel in the town. It was the only one. They also had a banquet room where the Rotary Club met. And I was waiting tables and cleaning the tables off. And when I had a chance to see all the people there and get to know who they were, it was really the important people in the town of Rushville. And my dad was included. He had 40 years of perfect attendance in Rotary because he was waiting tables every time.
So when did you join Rotary? John, when did you join
I joined
Seattle?
Rotary in 1970 or 71.
Okay.
And Don Kraft is his name?
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I had just bought Cummins Northwest, my company, and Howard Lovejoy, who owned Puget Sound Freight Lines, was a customer of mine, and he suggested that I join Rotary. He said I should get more involved in the community. So that's the reason I joined. I was actually, 1970, you'll recall, there was a sign up on the highway saying, "With the last person leaving Seattle, please turn out the lights." And I had just bought the company. My mechanics went on strike, and I thought, well, this probably isn't a really good time to join Rotary, but I did it anyway.
And it worked out. John, take me back. We're going to cover a little bit of club history. And some of this stuff, looking back, it's probably not the most pleasant thing to talk about, a club that excluded half of the population. But I think we've learned a lot from that. We really have, I think, over the years. Take me back. During your year, it was decided that women would be admitted to Rotary. A lot of the younger folks in the room, I don't think, know the history of that, how that unfolded in the play between Rotary International and the local clubs and the International District, the rogue club that was letting women in anyway. So take me back to how did that unfold during your year?
Okay, well, I think you should understand that my memory is very similar to Brian Williams. That's proof. Actually, it was a very interesting year. I'm not sure when Rotary International came in to allowing it, but I do remember that the first small club that allowed women in was Duarte, California, and that was definitely before the time that Rotary International had approved it or had changed their bylaws. So then in Seattle, the International District Rotary had allowed women to come in. So I talked to the board at the time, and it was decided that it would be a good idea for us to take a lead role and go ahead and do this. It was going to come anyway. We felt for sure. Having been married to my wife for some time, she hated being called a Rotary Ann. So anyway, we got the approval. I got the approval of the board. We wanted to be the first big club to allow women to join, and we felt it was appropriate for our club to do that. Some of us thought that way. There were obviously a lot of people that did not feel that way. One of the meetings I can remember when I talked about it at every meeting and said something about it. And as we were, progressively going on with this, I was going up to the podium when you can see what it's like in here for the president before the meetings start. And one day, a former district governor, who's no longer with us, I won't use his name, but he came up to me and he said, "If you say one more thing about allowing women into this club, I'm going to get up and demand equal time." So I went, I went ahead with the meeting as I planned, and I did say what I wanted to say about that happening, and he did not get up and demand equal time, fortunately. But there was some old-timers in the club at that time, and the club was about 840 members at that time. So it was obviously that most of the people felt that was a wise thing to do.
And you told me that you were among, was it 5 women introduced that year? And the strategy being that if one person became the first female member, that would sort of put a lot of pressure on them. And so tell me the strategy of the 5, and what was that like?
Well, I think actually they invited Mickey, and help me with Mickey's last name. Right. She really was the first woman up member of Rotary 4. She was our executive director at the time, and I thought that was a very wise choice because she was the only one that could hold that position and then also be the first women member. I think there were 5 of us then that were invited all at the same time, and we were introduced sort of sequentially over several weeks so that there was no spotlight on any one of us, which was probably a very wise thing of the club. But could I take a minute to follow up on the story about the early days and the fact that there were people in the club who were not in favor of including women? And one of them was a very staunch and very strong Rotarian named Michael Dederer. And you all remember Michael, I'm sure. He actually, according to David Eubanks, who I talked to just this week, and I'll tell you why in a minute, he actually threatened to take the club with a lawsuit if they were to invite women. That never happened, of course. But here's the story that I want to tell you. David Eubanks, David Eubanks, who was a member of this club for a very long time, was my proposer. And guess who my seconder was? Mike Dederer. And that is a story that is worth taking to heart, that you can be a loyal minority and you can state your case and you can accept the verdict when it comes in and it isn't in your favor, and then you participate fully. So my hat is off to Mike. I wish he were here today, and I just cherish that particular moment in my life.
That is an interesting story, Ann, thank you. I want to talk about your presidency in just a sec, but I want to stay with that time when you joined the club. Did you get any opposition? Was there anything said? Did anybody say something outrageous to you?
Never. I want to say to every man in the room who was there at the time, never. Now, that's not to say that some really stupid things got said from the podium. And much to the
Could you have who said it stand up right now?
No.
No, I'm kidding.
You know, they were sort of foot-and-mouth disease type of comments, and they were like talking about, let's say, the Christmas party or something like that, and they'd say, "Now all of you bring your wives." And then, of course, there were those of us in the room who took exception to that. So they were funny things. Never a bad comment about the decision or about me personally.
Can I say?
Yes, equal time. Did you press that again? You got to hold, press and hold.
Oh,
There you go.
Don Kraft introduced the first 3 women presidents. I can't remember exactly what his nickname for them were. It was something like Babe and Honey and Sweetie or something.
I think we need another chair up here. I want to move on to Nancy to talk about your presidency. You served as our centennial president, and you presided over the largest project in our club's history. Is that correct? Wellspring Family Services, a $4 million campaign to help Wellspring build that Center for Homeless Families. I wanted to start by asking, what was the key to overseeing a campaign that large, building the momentum for it during your year? I mean, it's hard enough being president, much less undertaking something like that.
Well, that falls into the theme of it takes a whole team to do any major project. And of course, Don Kraft led that effort 5 years before the project culminated. I was very honored when Don asked me to serve as his vice chair for that centennial work, and Don continually reminded me during those years that as vice chair, I was in charge of vice, and that was my responsibility. So it was coming together with a very carefully structured fund development plan, media plan, and member engagement. So it came together in my year, but the project started many, many years ahead.
One of the greatest challenges during your presidency, Nancy, was that you found out that a longtime employee of the club had been embezzling money, hundreds of thousands of dollars. and you found out the night before the Centennial Gala. Take me back to the night that you found out.
Well, let me take you back to several days before, and again repeating the theme of it takes a team. For those of you in the room, the group of past presidents truly are a group of has-beens, and we sort of like it that way, but they also are a tremendous resource when it comes to handling challenges and opportunities. When we became aware that there was a potential problem, I called together a SWAT team of past presidents. Eric Bremner was brought on to handle communications. Skip Kotkins was brought on to help with our work in the community and for his business expertise, and Carl Egge, because you always need a good lawyer. So we were aware that there was a potential challenge, but it was, in fact, exactly the night before our centennial event where we had 1,050 coming for dinner, and both our members, the Bills Gates, were going to be speaking. We realized that we had a real serious situation. So for that night, I had my binder with all of the script and everything that was going on, but in the back of my book was my press statement, because every media outlet was attending the event, and we needed to be ready to respond to that.
I was part of that program that night, and what shocked me later is that we had no idea.
Well, my favorite story, I just recounted it to Todd, Todd Sommerfeld, who was the chair of that evening, and after the evening was over, I went up to Todd and I said, you know, I'm really sorry, I didn't get my notes to you for my part in the program before the actual event, and he kind of looked a little, oh, gee, I don't know why not. And I told him what had happened, and he actually leaned back against the wall, I'm sure tired from all of the effort of the evening, and he said, thank God you didn't tell me.
But when we look at that case, and I'm glad we're talking about this, because a great leader reaches out for help when they need it, right? They don't try to go it alone. And number two, a great leader only tells the people that need to know in a crisis, because otherwise it spirals out of control and can overtake the rest of the thing. I really think that story says a lot about your leadership and the leadership within this club.
The team.
So
It was absolutely the team.
I'd like to talk a little bit about, let's go back to Ann's year as president. You told me it took a little time. Presidents get a call, prospective presidents, presidents-elect, they get a call. Hey, we'd like you to be our president. And when Ann got the call, she said,
Let me think about it. That's what I said, and there was sort of a silence, and they, oh, well, okay, you can do that. I was so unschooled in the rituals of Rotary, being the first of this and that I didn't realize that there was only one answer to give, and that it was expected that you do it on the spot. So I took about 2 weeks of thinking about it, and eventually I got a call from the president of the club who said, Ann, we have to know, we have to announce this like on Wednesday. So, you know, the rest is history, but I didn't realize that I was making a whole cadre of the board and the nominating committee and all the rest, and very, very nervous.
They probably thought you were negotiating with the Kiwanis or the Lions Club for a better spot.
And those calls are really important. I remember after I had accepted, the very first call that I received was from Ann Farrell, and it meant a tremendous I was very proud to get that, and again, the camaraderie that went with that.
It's a real and vibrant thing. The other thing that I remember about that very first couple of weeks was I was at the full flood of my career and working extremely hard with a very small staff, and I really did have to consider whether the time involved with a organization like this would work for me at that moment. And so I did talk to some of the past presidents, and you know, it varied, I think, between us. We could interview each and every one that's here. The call came to each of us at different stages of our career. Sometimes they were retired people who really could take this on as their job for a year. Others were in different stages of their careers and could give more or less time. I found that for my moment, delegation was particularly important. I simply could not be on deck for 365 days of the year. And so the team that Nancy talks about becomes ever more important when you put that board together and rely on the board to be self-starters, essentially. So I was a manager, not a despot, I guess.
I want to move on to John in just a second, but first, Ann, you told me that after you were elected president, you met with a small group of women in the club, and they urged you to sort of draft a female agenda to move forward. And tell the audience, if you would, what your response was.
Well, that was probably the most difficult moment of my entire presidency, and it happened before I actually took office. A group of the women, and there weren't that many of us in the club at the time, took me to lunch and told me how thrilled they were that I was going to be the president of the club and that there would be a woman president. And they then kind of laid out an agenda for me that included such things as having a women's only table, a women's committee, things of that sort. And I was really taken aback and had not given this kind of thing any thought in terms of how we would plan the year. But what I said to them was, you know, a group of men have opened their club to women and incorporated us as full-fledged members, not Rotary Anns, as how ironic can that be? But that was what they called the women who were the spouses of the men in the club, Rotary Anns. So, but they didn't try to make us second-class citizens. They really said, you are Rotarians full-fledged. And so I said to this group of women, it would be entirely out of my personal belief to separate us in any way, that we are members of this club, fully incorporated, and more than that, I, as the first president, am the president of the entire club. I don't represent any small portion of it. And I believe that's why this club, to this day, is so inclusive. And I'm really glad they put me on the spot, and I had to think of it sort of in standing there, but I believe it carries on to this day.
I think one of the things that every president has to deal with is just the busyness and the time commitment of the job. John, I think you told me you were running 4 companies at the time you were asked to be president. Is that correct? How did you manage your time successfully?
Well, I'm not sure it was successfully, but just like you have to have a good chairs of your committee when you have a business, especially 4 businesses, you have to have good people running them. The problem I had was that one of the companies was not doing very well, and I was quite concerned about, you know, taking this load on at that time. But I talked to Bill Weisfield and said, what do you think I should do? He said, don't take the Rotary job. You know, it's just, you got too much on your plate. But actually, I took it, and it worked fine. And we lost some money, but it worked out really well in the end. We got turned around.
Nancy, what about you? Any insight into the balance?
What do you mean? I'm still trying to catch up. No, I think you take it a day at a time. The past presidents will remember you take it a week at a time. On Wednesday afternoon, about 4 o'clock, you're exhausted, and then on Thursday morning, you get your agenda for the next week, and you just keep going, and before you know it, your year is over.
I know past presidents all have that sort of goofy smile, like right after you get married. Remember, you're like on your honeymoon and you're just like, ooh. I saw Tom still has that smile on his face because it's such a relief to be out from under the pile, but we're glad that you all serve. I wanted to ask, since we have, and I'm so inspired by the young women who are on stage here as the new generation of Rotary leaders, I wanted to ask, what's your best advice to the future leaders of this club? Ann, let's begin with you.
Well, I hearken back to just the idea that we all are in this together and that there are no superior groups or cliques, or I'm just all in favor of both young and old working together, and I'm delighted to see that there are new young members coming up in the club. That's a great thing. I would just hope that we continue to attract the leadership in the community, and certainly looking out over this room, you're doing a great job of that, but I think that's probably a key for this club, is to continue to bring in the young leadership throughout the city.
And Ann, you said that one of your strategies from a management standpoint was, once you were elected president, you really let the leaders who were working with you shine. Was that a conscious decision, or someone taught that to you?
No, that was a conscious decision, but not just about Rotary. I had the opportunity to be president of a couple of other membership organizations, and I just happen to believe that you have your chance to influence organizations in many ways, and you have one of your opportunities as you're coming up in the organization. You chair committees, you have impact in various arenas, but once you're the president, your job is to make sure that the future leadership is coming up throughout the organization, any organization.
Nancy, when we talked on the phone, you said your best advice to future presidents or leaders of this club is to be yourself and don't be afraid to be vulnerable or emotional.
It brings back an important memory. When I became president, I really wanted to be witty and clever at the podium, to come with these great responses, but that isn't who I am. And I realized that I would have to be who I am if I was going to survive. And so, well, you know, that would be advice I would give. But also to let the membership know who you are personally. The story that resonates most with me was we had a program, Bobby Bridge was talking about how important we all are in the lives of young and emerging adults and children. And as I closed the meeting, I mentioned that, in fact, that week my brother had died. And I shared with the club how important he had been to me, and shared things that he probably didn't even remember, but were so incredibly impactful to me. The teddy bear he gave me, I still have. And some of those memories, and so I was trying to encourage the club to get involved, and I looked up, and there were tears in many people's eyes. And that afternoon, I got more emails from people interested in sharing that journey, more that meeting than when I announced that we had had an embezzlement.
When I talked to John on the phone, John, this was really interesting, and I was like, wow, when somebody tells you something really insightful, I always just have to soak it in for a minute. You told me your best advice for future Rotary leaders is to pay attention to what you believe and realize you can only do so much in a year. I think all of us are guilty of scrambling with a dozen different irons in the fire, and we end up doing a lot of things not very well. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, if you're president of a Rotary Club, you should, as you said, be yourself, because you wouldn't be there if they didn't want you. And the idea is to get a good group of committee chairs and let them do their work. And I think that's a real key.
And finally, Nancy, you said one thing that we all need to do, and when I say we, I mean those of us with gray hair, is get out of the way of the future leaders of Rotary. and some things will make us feel uncomfortable, but that's okay.
Absolutely. I think that that will be the absolute future of this organization, is to get out of the way of the emerging leadership. And particularly in the last 5-10 years, so much has changed. The pace is faster than it has been in generations. And you think of social media, you think of all of the interconnections. And our club will change, and it will be very different, but we have to embrace that. And by the way, if anyone could help me with Twitter, I'd really appreciate it.
It's 140 characters. I'm kidding. Well, I just want to thank the panel. You've been fantastic. Thank you for being honest and sharing part of your experience, your life with us. And in closing, I just wanted to say a couple of things about the presidency. One of my favorite parts of Rotary is that every year as the presidency is passed from one member to the next, it feels like being part of a brand new club, a brand new organization. Each president has strengths and interests that are completely unique. And in my 11 years in this club, I mean, I think back and Carl Egge's weekly lessons on Lewis and Clark. Do you guys remember that? I learned more from Carl than I did in all of middle school. And I looked forward to it every week. And Bill Center, what was it, the 50 pretty good rules to live by? I looked forward to those every week. So we learn and we grow through each of our presidents, and we appreciate their uniqueness. The point is there's no single right way to run this club. It simply takes a heart for service, it takes courage, and it takes commitment. So to all of the past presidents here today, I want to just say, we're honored to have you here. We're honored to call you friends, but most of all, we're grateful for your legacy of leadership. Thank you very much.